A guy who was bitten by a spider has to fight a man who was bitten by a fish. Find out how this battle will end from the recap of the movie The Amazing Spider-Man 2 – Rise of Electro. Genius scientist Richard Parker deletes some files from his computer, takes a vial of chemical substance and injects it into the container with live spiders. They immediately die. The man grabs his briefcase and leaves the lab. He records a message describing his research and leaves with his wife, while their young son Peter plays at home. Mr. and Mrs. Parker fly on a plane. A suspicious crew member approaches Richard, pulls out a gun, and locks his wife in the laboratory. The scientist manages to upload some data from his computer. Mrs. Parker breaks down the door, and a fight between Richard and the flight attendant ensues. The scientist manages to knock out the villain, but his wife gets seriously injured. During the flight, the cabin depressurizes. The plane crashes and all the passengers on board die. In the next scene, we see Spider-Man flying among the skyscrapers of New York City and swinging on webs like Tarzan on vines. He hears a report that someone has stolen a truckload of plutonium. The robber races through the city street, chased by the police, and Spider-Man decides to help the cops. He lands on the truck, knocks on the driver's window and says hello. The villain immediately grabs a rifle. Meanwhile, a man named Max Dillon is walking down the street. He drops notes with his blueprints, at which point a car flies at him. Fortunately, he is saved by Spider-Man. The cops manage to stop the truck, but in doing so, most of their cars are involved in an accident. A couple of criminals grab their rifles and initiate a gunfight, but Spider-Man uses his web to disarm the villains and hand them over to the cops. The main robber attempts to escape. Containers of plutonium fall from the truck. Spider-Man manages to catch them and save the city from a serious disaster. He gets a call from his girlfriend Gwen. Their graduation ceremony is in full swing, and her boyfriend is late. Spider-Man lies that he got caught in traffic and promises to come soon. The protagonist overtakes the truck, sits on the hood and struggles to break the windshield. The vehicle crashes into the bus and it starts to roll over. Spider-Man manages to stop it and save a lot of people. The criminal runs away, but the superhero catches up with him, takes away his gun and a container of plutonium, and ties his hands with a spider web. He rushes to the graduation ceremony to get his diploma, managing to change his clothes on the way. Now he's not Spider-Man, but a regular guy named Peter Parker. Later that day, Peter unexpectedly breaks up with Gwen, realizing that she is in constant danger because of him. Day after day, the hero does his usual routine, protecting the weak, saving the city from accidents, and chasing criminals. On one of these days, his Aunt May knocks on Peter's door. The guy tries to take off his Spider-Man suit as soon as possible, crawling on the wall and ceiling. But he doesn't manage to do it on time, so he just lies down in bed and covers himself with a blanket. Aunt May enters the room, but thankfully doesn't notice anything suspicious. We learn that Max, who was rescued by Spider-Man, is his true fan. The man dreams that his idol will come to his birthday party. He takes a birthday cake out of the fridge, and at that moment, the lights go out in his house. The next morning, Max is late for work. It turns out that he works as an electrician in the Oscorp lab. The man takes the elevator with Gwen and tells her that he was saved by Spider-Man himself. In the meantime, Peter's close friend Harry Osborn returns to the city after his studies at a boarding school. He meets with his father Norman, the CEO of Oscorp. The man is seriously ill and admits to his son that his illness is hereditary. Harry is already experiencing the first symptoms. Norman gives his son a small device and declares that this is his life's work. The next day, Peter sends an email with a picture of Spider-Man to the editor of the newspaper. The news report that Norman has passed away, and his son Harry has been appointed as the new CEO of Oscorp. Max is about to go home after a day of work, but his boss stops him. The man is asked to stay late because of a power outage and to check what the problem is. He goes to the lab where the genetically modified electric eels are held. Max discovers a malfunction in one of the sections and climbs in there to cut the power. He tries to connect two parts of a huge wire, however, he gets electrocuted. The man falls into a tank full of eels. They bite him, after which the tank bursts. Harry attends his first board meeting and discovers that all animal-human crossbreeding research has been cancelled and all the test specimens have been destroyed. Peter comes to Harry's place. The old friends are very glad to see each other. They hug and go for a walk in the park and then on the embankment. They chat about life, reminisce about the past, and discuss the mysterious identity of Spider-Man. Meanwhile, Max's body is taken to the morgue. The lights are flashing, the bulbs burst, and Max comes back to life. Now he has the superpower to control electricity. The man takes his clothes and leaves. Peter meets Gwen. They decide to become good friends and smilingly discuss the new rules of their friendship. Gwen confesses that she is moving to England soon, as she is going to study at Oxford. All of a sudden, the guy senses danger and immediately disappears, leaving only his sneakers and jacket. Max is walking down the street. As he passes by the cars, their alarms go off. The man touches one of them and absorbs all its electricity. The bright blue man notices the glowing Times Square in front of him and heads there. Max walks up to the high voltage cables and absorbs even more electricity. A police officer notices this, calls for backup and heads towards the man. A van is about to hit Max, but he uses a beam of electricity to flip it over. Other policemen show up and surround him. The frightened man runs around and yells that he is innocent. However, the cops start attacking him, and then Max causes a shockwave, scattering everything around. Spider-Man shows up and tries to calm Max down, but suddenly, the troublemaker is shot by a sniper. The furious man loses control and attacks his idol. People in the square are in great danger, but Peter once again manages to save everyone and even launches a hydrant at Max. The blue antagonist immediately recharges, causing a blackout in the entire alley and breaking down the surrounding metal structures. Max absorbs so much energy that it gives him the ability to fly. He attacks the witnesses with lightning bolts, but Spider-Man disarms the furious man with a fire hose. Back home, Peter opens his father's briefcase and tries to figure out what he's been up to and why he left his son alone. Meanwhile, Harry notices new symptoms of his illness. He activates the device his father left him and turns on the recordings stored in it. It turns out that Richard Parker and Norman Osborn have been experimenting on genetically modified spiders that can heal themselves. Peter tries to improve his web shooting device so that he can withstand Max's electrical attacks, but instead he breaks the battery and starts a fire. Harry calls Peter and invites him for a visit. The guy tells his friend about the illness and shows him a video of their fathers discussing the experiment with spiders. Harry is sure that Peter is familiar with Spider-Man and asks him to get a sample of the superhero's blood. Meanwhile, Gwen is looking for information about Max, but this person doesn't exist in the database. Moreover, security immediately rushes to the girl. The blonde leaves her workspace and encounters Peter in the hallway. They hide in the storage room and kiss. Gwen walks to the elevator and Peter distracts the guards with a hot coffee. Then the girl meets Harry in the elevator. The researcher attaches special bioelectrodes to Max in the closed Oscorp lab to study the abilities of his body. The blue antagonist warns that they won't be able to restrain him because this place is also powered by electricity. A furious Max threatens to destroy Spider-Man and calls himself Electro. Harry is visited by Spider-Man. The letter states that he really wants to help the sick youngster, but he can't give the guy his blood because it's too dangerous. His refusal makes Harry furious. The guy throws a glass at Spider-Man, and the protagonist immediately leaves. At home, Peter once again tries to figure out what his father was hiding from him, and finds out that the clue can be found at an abandoned secret subway station called Roosevelt. Harry's assistant, Felicia, tells him that the company has preserved several samples of genetically modified spider venom. The guy turns on his father's device again and looks through Electro's files. Suddenly, the board of directors enters the office and fires Harry. Meanwhile, Peter sneaks into the subway and finds his father's secret lab. There he learns the whole truth about Oscorp and the spider experiment. It turns out that his father secretly used elements of his own DNA while creating the test spiders. Harry arrives at the closed Oscorp lab, knocks out the guards and breaks into the room where Electro is held. He offers the blue mutant a deal. Harry promises to release him, and in return, Max will take him to Oscorp headquarters and also destroy Spider-Man. The guards show up and grab Harry, but the guy manages to hit Max with a taser, and that's exactly what he needs. Electro electrocutes all the guards and breaks free from captivity. Together with Harry, they head to the Oscorp office, threaten the CEO, and force him to reveal the location of the venom samples. Electro gains access to the entire power grid. Harry gets to the desired laboratory and demands the CEO to inject him with a serum obtained from a genetically modified spider. After the injection, the guy immediately starts to mutate rapidly, screaming and tearing his clothes. He notices a green metal suit in the lab. He puts it on with his last strength and turns into another superhero, or rather, supervillain. Peter meets Gwen and kisses her on the bridge. All of a sudden, all the lights in the city go out. Airplanes lose contact with the ground. Panic ensues. Electro appears in the square and shoots lightning bolts. Spider-Man chases the antagonist and overtakes him at the power plant. A fierce battle immediately breaks out between the two. Unfortunately, Peter's abilities are not enough to defeat such a strong opponent, and soon he realizes that he is losing the battle. Gwen also arrives at the station. She's good at physics, so she decides to completely reboot the city's power grid. While Spider-Man heroically withstands the strongest electrical discharges, Gwen pulls the proper levers and reboots the system. Electro is unable to withstand such voltage and explodes into pieces. Suddenly, Harry appears out of nowhere. From now on, he's the Green Goblin. The former friends immediately recognize each other. To get revenge on Spider-Man, Green Goblin grabs Gwen, lifts her incredibly high, and drops her down. Peter manages to save his beloved and engages in a battle with the Green Goblin. Gwen falls again, but Peter successfully captures her with his web. Harry tries to cut it, but he fails. Peter puts a web loop around the goblin's neck and attaches it to the gears of a huge clockwork. The villain is trapped. Alas, at that moment, a web holding Gwen breaks and the girl falls down. Spider-Man rushes after his beloved, but fails to save her in time. After this tragedy, Peter never puts on the Spider-Man suit again and no longer saves the city from criminals. Harry is sent to the Ravencroft Asylum. One day, he is visited by a mysterious man in a hat who promises to help the villain. He releases a dangerous criminal named Alex Saitsevich from prison. Before long, Alex puts on electromechanical armor and robs a bank. Now he's a villain known as Rhino. The police have no chance to stop him. A little boy is wearing a Spider-Man costume and runs to the criminal. Rhino laughs, but suddenly, the real Spider-Man appears on the street. The audience cheers for him with applause, and the protagonist joins the battle. He's back to saving the world.